Kill my baby. I don't wish this on nobody.
Go away, bitch. Don't come over here. Kara, call the cops. Call the... It's all these kids in here. Call the cops, you dumb bitch.
On October 4th, 2025, at approximately 9:45 p.m., 23-year-old healthcare worker Kada Scott left her Philadelphia residence to begin her overnight shift at a senior living facility. Security footage confirmed her arrival, but she was never seen leaving. The following morning, her vehicle remained parked at the facility, doors locked, and personal belongings inside. Despite earlier concerns about being followed and receiving harassing messages, no formal police report had been filed prior to her disappearance. On October 18th, 2025, investigators discovered human remains buried behind the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School in Germantown. DNA testing later confirmed the identity as Kada Scott.
Breaking news. Police sources telling NBC 10 that the remains found in a shallow grave yesterday belonged to Kada Scott. She went missing after heading to work over 2 weeks ago. Today, a memorial is growing in her honor. NBC 10's Johnny Archer is at police headquarters with the latest on the investigation.
Right now, we're outside the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's office where they have been working to identify that body that was found yesterday. And tonight, our NBC 10 investigators have learned through their sources that body was Kada Scott.
The investigation soon focused on 26-year-old Kian King, who was charged with murder, abuse of a corpse, and tampering with evidence. The case has since revealed major deficiencies in harassment reporting, digital evidence handling, and workplace safety protocols. Issues now driving public demand for reform.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say her name!
Kada Scott!
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from, and what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kada.
Kada Scott's story begins in Philadelphia, where she was born into a loving and close-knit family. Those who knew her remember a young woman full of optimism, independence, and compassion. She was active in her church, volunteered in community programs, and carried an energy that naturally drew people in. After graduating from Penn State University with a degree in communications, she returned home determined to build a stable future. Kada had dreams of advancing into healthcare management. But for now, she found meaningful work as a caregiver at the Terrace at Chestnut Hill, a senior living facility known for its small staff and overnight shifts. Her dedication quickly stood out. Colleagues described her as dependable, often volunteering for late-night hours that ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. These shifts were quiet, but also isolated. The parking lot had no proper surveillance cameras or security patrols. Lighting was dim, and employees often walked alone to their cars. In the week before her disappearance, Kada began to show signs of unease. She confided in friends that she was receiving harassing phone calls from an unknown number. The voice on the other end reportedly whispered threats and new details about her work schedule. Though frightened, Kada decided not to contact police, fearing her report would be dismissed. The calls increased in frequency and aggression as the week went on. On October 4th, 2025, at around 9:45 p.m., Kada left home for another night shift. At 10 p.m., she arrived at the facility and parked in her usual spot. She entered briefly, then vanished. By 10:30 p.m., a co-worker noticed she hadn't signed in for her assignment. Her phone's final signal came from the same parking lot at 11 p.m. The only clue from that night came from her last text exchange with a contact saved as Kel. The messages read, "Kada, kidnap me again. Kel, better be up too." Investigators later traced Kel to 21-year-old Kian King of Delaware. Their connection was unclear: flirtation, friendship, or something darker. Kada never clocked in, never drove home, and never answered her phone again. The next morning, her family grew worried. Calls went unanswered. Police, at first, treated it as a routine missing person report. Her car remained in the parking lot with her purse, phone case, and keys still inside. Flyers began circulating through empty area in Germantown as the community mobilized under the hashtag #FindKada. Days passed with no progress. Detectives followed digital clues, tracing her call and text records. Repeated contact with King raised suspicions. Surveillance footage showed his gold Toyota Camry driving toward Germantown shortly after Kada's disappearance. Tower data placed both phones near the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School, a neglected site surrounded by overgrown brush and boarded windows. King's background painted a troubling picture. Months earlier, he had faced charges for kidnapping and assaulting another woman, but the case was dropped when the victim failed to appear in court. He was known to exhibit controlling and erratic behavior. For nearly 2 weeks, searches yielded nothing. Then, on October 18th, a tip led officers to the wooded area behind the old middle school. There, partially buried beneath debris, were human remains wrapped in plastic. Forensic testing confirmed it was Kada Scott. The autopsy determined she died from a gunshot wound to the head. By that point, King was already in custody on kidnapping charges. After the discovery, prosecutors added counts of first-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, arson, and evidence tampering. Soil samples and burned fabric found in his car matched material from the crime scene. Despite his denial, digital forensics showed attempts to delete messages and location data linking him to Kada's final moments. The community's grief turned to outrage. Many questioned how prior warning signs were ignored. The dropped charges months before, the lack of surveillance at her workplace, and the uninvestigated harassment all pointed to systemic neglect. In the aftermath, Kada's family launched a campaign pushing for Kada's Law, legislation requiring overnight facilities to install security cameras in employee parking areas. Her story became a rallying cry for victims whose fears were dismissed until tragedy struck. The trial against King remains pending, but the impact of Kada's disappearance is already evident. It exposed the dangers of workplace isolation, failures in law enforcement follow-up, and the devastating cost of silence. Her case stands as both a cautionary tale and a demand for accountability, a reminder that danger often announces itself long before it strikes. The investigation into Kada Scott's disappearance began with a close examination of her phone records. Investigators noticed consistent contact between Kada and a man named King in the days leading up to her disappearance. King's number appeared in her call logs at key times, and geolocation data placed both phones within the same radius at multiple locations. Police obtained a subpoena for King's digital activity, revealing suspicious movements that coincided with Kada's last known whereabouts. Traffic and gas station cameras traced a gold Toyota Camry registered to King, leaving the vicinity of the senior living facility around the time Kada vanished. The vehicle was next recorded heading toward Germantown, near an abandoned school later connected to the case. King's background deepened suspicion. At 21, originally from Delaware, he already had a history of volatile behavior. Months earlier, a domestic abduction case against him had been dropped when the victim failed to appear in court. He was known for manipulation, control, and threats, traits that now seem to resurface in the context of Kada's disappearance. Detectives learned that King and Kada met through mutual acquaintances earlier in the year and had maintained a complex, inconsistent relationship. The digital trail strengthened the case. Cell tower data placed both King's and Kada's phones near the Ada H. Lewis Middle School, an abandoned structure with overgrown fields and no surveillance. Investigators later recovered burnt fragments from a vehicle near this area, eventually matched to King's Camry. Witnesses reported seeing him accompanied by an unidentified man in the backfield of property days after Kada went missing. Despite these leads, police faced mounting criticism for delays. The family alleged that officers were slow to upgrade the case from a missing person report to a suspected abduction. Initial reports of harassment directed at Kada were dismissed as non-criminal disturbances, and no emergency tracking was initiated on King's vehicle until several days had passed. These early missteps cost critical time. By the time law enforcement focused on King as a prime suspect, his phone had been powered off, and portions of his data were already deleted. Investigators would later find evidence that digital logs had been intentionally tampered with. A significant breakthrough arrived on October 18, 2025, when a tip led police to a wooded area behind the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School. There, beneath layers of debris, officers discovered a shallow grave containing decomposed remains wrapped in plastic. Forensic tests confirmed the identity: Kada Scott. The autopsy determined the cause of death as a gunshot wound to the head, officially ruled a homicide. Additional findings suggested that her body had been moved and buried post-mortem, consistent with efforts to conceal evidence.
And less than an hour ago, the Philadelphia Health Department announced that Kada Scott died of a gunshot wound to the head. While we know how she died, there's still so many questions about why she was killed.
NBC 10's Lily Zhang live for us in East Germantown with details and a closer look at what court documents show about her final hours alive. Zizi, Lily.
Hey there, good morning to you guys. The cause of death was revealed after investigators had talked a little bit about the evidence that they've collected so far. So we're talking about phone activity, cell phone activity, surveillance video, all kind of detailing what we know so far about this case. You can see behind us, there is a growing memorial for Kada Scott. Now, we spoke with some members of the community a little earlier. They say the evidence revealed so far has raised concerns, and so many people in the community already had a lot of questions about safety.
Looking, I don't know if you can pan over there, but you'll see how dark it is. There's no monitoring. You just found a body over here, so why don't you have this entire place illuminated and have it monitored?
Some of the only light Thursday morning came from this memorial outside Ada Lewis Middle. It's in memory of Kada Scott. The 23-year-old woman's remains were found near the vacant middle school Saturday, 2 weeks after she disappeared. The ME confirmed Thursday she was shot in the head.
You have all of these areas that should be cleaned up, should have 24-hour surveillance, and they're not. And my question to elected city officials is, what are you doing to ensure the safety of all residents, not just when something like this happens?
James Bronner grew up in the area and has been following this case. Scott disappeared from her senior living facility job in Chestnut Hill on October 4th. It's the same day court documents revealed 12 calls were made between Scott and Keon King, the man now charged with murder. Text messages include one from Scott reading, "Kidnap me again," with King allegedly replying, "Better be up too." It's followed up by Scott telling him to call her when he arrived. According to court documents, Scott's co-worker told detectives she was upset that night and said over the phone, "I can't believe you're calling me about this." This was before she allegedly walked towards a car parked outside of their job just before 10:15. Scott's phone went dead 9 minutes later.
Recovering Kada's body was not the outcome we had hoped for, but we are grateful that we were able to bring her home.
Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel addressed the case last night at a safety town hall, vowing to hold anyone involved accountable. On the night of Scott's disappearance, investigators say surveillance video shows King getting out of a stolen black Hyundai at a rec center near Ada Lewis. Not long after Scott's phone died, he leaves it there, coming back the next night with someone else, this time in a gold Camry, which has since been towed by police. The two seem to remove something heavy from the Hyundai towards where Scott's remains were found. Then, on the morning of October 7th, King goes back to the Hyundai, allegedly driving off with it. It was later set on fire. As Scott's family mourns, community members say they are with them, hoping justice is served.
This unfortunate, tragic situation, I believe, could have been avoided.
Now, the Office of King's Attorney says they are not commenting at this time. We also did reach out to the city earlier this morning to see if they plan to hold any more town halls to address some of the concerns like the one you heard from in this report. We will keep you posted as soon as we hear back from them. For now, reporting live in East Germantown, Lily Zhang, NBC 10 News.
Lily, thank you.
Items recovered at the site included her identification card, bank card, and fragments of her phone case. The discovery triggered widespread public reaction. Vigils were organized throughout Philadelphia, while outrage spread across social media. Many questioned why the abandoned property remained unsecured and how prior reports of harassment were ignored. Media coverage exposed earlier court failures, particularly King's dropped domestic abduction case, and highlighted systemic flaws that allowed known offenders to reoffend without intervention. National outlets framed the tragedy as part of a broader pattern of law enforcement inaction and oversight in cases involving young women of color. By this stage, the investigation had connected a clear chain, repeated communication between victim and suspect, vehicle evidence near the burial site, and digital data linking their movements. Although it provided a detailed reconstruction of events, it also illuminated broader structural failings, delays, underestimation of threat levels, and lapses in response that turned a preventable disappearance into a homicide. The case against King was now undeniable, but the timeline of errors will remain as haunting as the crime itself. On October 14th, 2025, just days before Kada Scott's remains were discovered, Philadelphia police arrested 21-year-old Kian King. His arrest came after investigators identified his phone as a last device to communicate with Kada's before her disappearance. Initially, King faced a kidnapping charge based on circumstantial evidence linking him to her final movements. When forensic confirmation tied him directly to her death, the charges escalated dramatically. First-degree murder, robbery, abuse of a corpse, arson, tampering with evidence, and criminal conspiracy.
Disturbing new details about the tragic death of Kada Scott. The man accused of kidnapping the 23-year-old is now charged with her murder. CBS News Philadelphia's Brendan Goldner live in our newsroom with the latest and this new timeline. Brandon, good morning.
That's right, Janelle. Good morning. We're still working to find out how Kada Scott was killed and when Kian King, the man accused of killing her, will be arraigned on this new charge. Meanwhile, Police Commissioner Kevin Bethel made a promise to Scott's family, friends, and residents during a community meeting about safety.
We will not stop, ladies and gentlemen, till everyone who was responsible for her death is brought to bear.
As that search continues, newly released court records reveal on October 4th, Kada Scott received a dozen calls from Kian King as she was arriving to work. Those records say Scott texted King, quote, "kidnap me again," and King replied, quote, "better be up to," followed by plans to meet later that night. It's important to note we don't know the context of these messages. At the same time, court documents say a co-worker overheard an upset Scott on the phone saying, quote, "I can't believe you're calling me about this expletive." Court records show the last text between Scott and King said, "CM when you hear," or "call me when you're here" at 10:09 p.m. Scott's seen leaving work a short time later. Cell phone data shows Scott and King arriving together at Aubrey Rec Center's parking lot next to the vacant Ada H.H. Lewis Middle School. Soon after, court documents reveal Scott's cell phone stopped transmitting a signal at 10:24 p.m. Sources tell CBS News Philadelphia they believe Scott was killed 20 minutes after she left work. Court documents show King had help. On October 5th, court records reveal a surveillance camera captured King and two other people in a rec center parking lot next to the middle school. Two are seen moving what court papers describe as a heavy object consistent with a human body. Records say they then went to an area where Scott's body was eventually found. Investigators say the car King used to pick up Scott was set on fire on October 7th.
We continue to pursue anyone who helped, who concealed, who participated in this act.
King remains in jail. Again, we're working to find out when he'll be back in court to be arraigned on that murder charge. We reached out to King's attorney, but we have yet to hear back. Janelle.
All right. Thank you for that update, Brandon. And the tragic death of Kada Scott is now drawing attention to public safety and vacant properties in the city, including this vacant school where her body was found nearby. Dozens packed a community town hall last night in Germantown, blocks away from the Ada Lewis Middle School. Top city leaders, including the mayor, the police commissioner, who we heard from in Brandon's piece, and the school district of Philadelphia Superintendent Tony Watlington, were there to address residents' concerns.
I want you to know that we've directed our team to check every one of our vacant properties.
Knock it down, leave it as a park. Trees. Get rid of all this freaking junky cars they keep bringing around here. Get them out of here.
CBS News Philadelphia saw district crews cleaning the vacant Fairhill Elementary School in North Philadelphia yesterday. The school is one of 20 vacant school properties within the district.
Each charge reflected an action taken to harm, conceal, or mislead. The investigation suggests a deliberate effort. Attempts to erase data, destroy physical proof, and eliminate electronic trails. The weight of these charges reflected both the brutality of the act and the methodical cover-up that followed. Forensic specialists reconstructed a timeline using digital and physical traces. Text recovered from Kada's device, though partially deleted, showed late-night exchanges between her and King, with tones alternating between familiarity and tension. Digital forensics exposed attempts on King's part to delete messages and location histories hours after her phone stopped transmitting. Cell tower records placed both devices near the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School the night Kada vanished, correlating with later discoveries of her buried remains. Surveillance footage from local intersections captured King's gold Toyota Camry, traveling toward the site at 11:37 p.m., then returning alone approximately an hour later. When the car was recovered, traces of soil found in the trunk matched samples from the burial site. Inside, investigators discovered burnt fabric remnants, chemically consistent with the fibers of Kada's work uniform. The smell of accelerant confirmed an attempt had been made to destroy evidence, possibly to obscure DNA transfer or blood stains. Forensic recovery from a partially destroyed phone chip revealed manual deletions and data overwrites, establishing intent to conceal involvement. These findings collectively positioned King not as a peripheral contact, but as a central actor in a premeditated abduction and homicide. Following his arrest, King's bail was set at $2.5 million, effectively ensuring pretrial detention. During a preliminary hearing, prosecutors outlined a pattern of escalating behavior, suggesting obsession and intent rather than spontaneous violence. They argued that King used familiarity and digital communication to manipulate Kada into a vulnerable situation. The defense, however, dismissed the text as playful banter, insisting that the messages lacked criminal context and that no conclusive proof showed she entered his vehicle willingly. They further claimed that no direct footage depicted a confrontation or abduction, implying alternative scenarios. Investigators continued to pursue evidence of accomplices, citing witness reports of two individuals near the burial area and inconsistencies in the vehicle's odometer readings. Forensic testimony indicated that the disposal required multiple trips, possibly suggesting help in transporting or concealing the body. Prosecutors requested expanded digital subpoenas to trace other potential phones in the vicinity during the critical window. The preliminary hearing concluded with the judge ruling sufficient probable cause to proceed to trial on all major charges. King's criminal history revealed a disturbing precedent. Months earlier, he had been charged in a Delaware County kidnapping and strangulation case involving another woman who alleged he had forcibly detained her during a domestic dispute. That case was dismissed after the victim failed to appear in court, reportedly due to fear of retaliation and lack of protection. Despite the severity of the allegations, no follow-up restrictions were imposed, allowing King full freedom of movement. Critics later argued that this lapse, failing to pursue alternative testimony or protective measures, enabled him to reoffend. Records showed no probationary oversight, electronic monitoring, or mandatory check-ins following the case's dismissal. The facility where Kada worked lacked external surveillance cameras, particularly in the employee parking area where she was last seen. Lighting was inadequate, and staff reported repeated incidents of suspicious vehicles loitering nearby in prior months. No standardized safety protocol existed for employees walking to or from their cars during overnight shifts. Internal review confirmed that security patrols ended at 9:30 p.m., half an hour before Kada's shift began. These conditions created an unmonitored environment where abductions could occur unnoticed. Following the incident, Kada's family began advocating for Kada's Law, a proposed state mandate requiring all night shift employers to install surveillance systems and maintain visible security during transition hours. Attention soon turned to the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, criticized for its handling of King's earlier case. Advocates and legal analysts questioned why repeat offenders with violent patterns were not subject to enhanced supervision or flagging under existing threat databases. Public outrage expanded into city hearings, where council members introduced motions to review abandoned property management policies, given that the schoolyard where Kada's remains are found had long been unsealed and neglected. The site's status as unsecured public property enabled offenders to exploit it as a disposal ground without immediate detection. Further scrutiny fell on interagency communication gaps between local law enforcement parole databases, and social service systems. The lack of real-time data sharing delayed the identification of King as a suspect, despite his known criminal tendencies. Policy groups call for a centralized violent offender registry for dropped but severe cases, ensuring that dismissed charges involving violence or abduction remain traceable across jurisdictions. The Kada case became emblematic of how multiple system failures converge to create fatal outcomes. Weak institutional safeguards, procedural complacency, and fragmented accountability chains allowed a preventable tragedy to unfold. Law enforcement's delay in escalating the case from missing person to abduction, the court's earlier dismissal of a nearly identical offense, and the absence of workplace surveillance collectively contributed to the outcome. Each breakdown functioned independently, yet together they formed the conditions that enabled the crime to occur undeterred. In response, Philadelphia legislators began drafting new bills to modernize public safety oversight, including the Mandatory Surveillance Infrastructure Act and provisions for employee safety audits. Meanwhile, victim advocacy groups pushed for broader court reform, emphasizing consistent monitoring of individuals charged with violent conduct even after dismissal or plea arrangements. By late 2025, investigative reports revealed additional evidence suggesting King's crime was not spontaneous but rehearsed, supported by deleted GPS searches, staged alibis, and physical preparation for disposal. These details, though now part of sealed court filings, underscored a chilling reality. The system had all the warning signs but no mechanisms to intervene. The case continues to redefine conversations about institutional responsibility, workplace safety, and the limitations of reactive justice. As it proceeds toward trial, it stands not only as a prosecution of one man, but as an examination of how collective neglect, procedural gaps, and systemic inertia allowed a young woman's life to be taken in silence. In the days after Kada Scott's body was recovered, her family transitioned from grief to advocacy. Her mother and sister appeared before local news cameras outside Philadelphia City Hall with a single repeated statement. She asked for help. No one listened. They explained that Kada had confided her fears about a man who had been following her, making repeated phone calls, and waiting near her workplace. According to them, those concerns were voiced days before her disappearance, but no formal report was ever filed. Their statement highlighted a critical gap between informal pleas for help and official action. A foundation was soon established in Kada's name, its primary goal to support missing person search initiatives and provide digital assistance for families navigating the first 48 hours of disappearance. The foundation proposed a new model: direct collaboration between law enforcement agencies and private technology companies to enable emergency GPS tracking once a disappearance is reported. The goal was to cut through bureaucratic delays that often consume the most crucial investigative hours. The family also began pushing for legislation requiring real-time cooperation between mobile carriers, app developers, and law enforcement during active missing person investigations. They argued that access to location data, when properly authorized, should not take days of court filings. Their proposal became the basis of a legislative initiative called the Digital Response Partnership Act, intended to improve data sharing in emergencies involving harassment or abduction. The reaction from the Philadelphia community was immediate and intense. Vigils turned into marches. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse demanding stronger laws addressing stalking and harassment, arguing that current procedures rely too heavily on formal reports even when repeated digital threats exist. Protesters carried signs reading, "Ignored warnings are death sentences," and Kada asked for help. Women's advocacy groups nationwide joined the conversation, emphasizing the broader failure of institutions to respond swiftly to early warning signs. The National Coalition for Victim Safety issued a statement urging federal reform in harassment response times, citing Kada's case as an example of how delayed action can turn preventive policing into reactive recovery. Social media became both memorial and movement. The hashtag Justice for Kada Scott spread across platforms, with thousands posting stories of ignored harassment complaints. Grassroots digital campaigns call for improved workplace safety for night shift employees, particularly in healthcare and service industries. Activists circulated footage of unlit parking lots and abandoned properties, visual representations of the vulnerability faced by night workers. Within weeks, media coverage began to shift its focus. Early commentary that had subtly questioned Kada's decisions, why she worked nights, why she didn't file a formal report, was replaced with scrutiny of institutional accountability. The narrative turned from victim behavior to system failure. Experts began analyzing the underlying neglect of safety in low-wage care work, where employees often faced dangerous environments without sufficient protection or surveillance. Kada's story came to represent the consequences of a broken chain of response, where law enforcement, courts, and employers each relied on others to act first. The case forced public institutions to reevaluate how complaints, even informal ones, are handled. Local universities incorporated the case into criminal justice discussions, using it to illustrate structural deficiencies in threat assessment and victim support networks. Despite the mounting evidence against King, the case remains full of unanswered questions. Investigators continue to examine motive. Some point to a personal dispute that escalated, while others suggest an obsessive fixation. King's behavior before Kada's disappearance, frequent messages, uninvited appearances at her workplace, indicates preoccupation, but his exact intent remains under review. There are also unresolved suspicions regarding potential accomplices. Surveillance footage showed an unidentified male near King's car at the abandoned school. That individual has not been identified or located, leaving uncertainty about whether King acted alone. Investigators continue to review communication logs and traffic footage to trace this person's movements. The choice of the abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School as the burial site raises further questions. Why that location? Some speculate familiarity. Perhaps King or his associates had prior knowledge of the property's isolation. Others suspect it was selected precisely because of its reputation as an unsecured, forgotten space. Another lingering issue involves the harassing calls Kada received before her disappearance. Forensic voice analysis and call records have not conclusively linked all of them to King. Investigators have considered the possibility of multiple sources, which complicates the timeline and raises the prospect of other individuals being involved or aware of her situation prior to her abduction. Critical evidence gaps persist. The murder weapon, identified to ballistic residue but never recovered, remains missing. Searches of surrounding areas and waterways yielded no trace. Investigators believe the gun was deliberately disposed of outside the jurisdiction to hinder prosecution. The unidentified male seen on surveillance footage remains unaccounted for. Police have released still images but have not matched them to any known associate of King. This missing link could determine whether the crime was premeditated by more than one person or the result of an individual escalation. Forensic experts also identified irregularities in King's phone data. Time gaps in metadata anomalies suggest deliberate deletion. Recovery software confirmed that several communications were manually erased during the hours following Kada's disappearance. These deletions, though partially reconstructed, have made it difficult to establish precise sequence of events between her final text message and her presumed time of death. DNA evidence from the burial site matched both Kada and King, but no secondary profiles were found. Investigators, however, caution that absence of evidence does not confirm singular involvement, especially considering environmental degradation at the scene. The case remains in pre-trial proceedings at Philadelphia County Court. Prosecutors are pursuing first-degree murder charges, arguing that evidence supports premeditation based on digital tracking, text exchanges, and concealment of the body. If the court determines the act involved aggravating factors, such as kidnapping or concealment of evidence, the case may qualify for the death penalty under Pennsylvania law. Defense attorneys maintain that the relationship between King and Kada was consensual and that text messages have been misinterpreted. They argue there is insufficient proof of kidnapping and question the chain of custody of certain digital evidence. Court observers expect a lengthy trial. The prosecution's timeline relies heavily on digital forensics, while the defense plans to challenge data interpretation methods. The Scott family has vowed to attend every hearing, emphasizing their commitment to ensuring the full story is presented publicly. The aftermath of Kada Scott's case continues to shape discussions about safety, justice, and institutional responsibility. Her death exposed significant deficiencies in the way harassment and missing person reports are handled, especially for women working late hours in understaffed facilities. Advocacy organizations have since called for comprehensive reform, insisting that employers share responsibility for ensuring safe working conditions beyond their immediate premises. A proposed piece of legislation, known as Kada's Law, is under review in the Pennsylvania state legislature. It mandates security camera installation in all employee parking areas for facilities operating past midnight, emergency call systems linked directly to local law enforcement, and stricter penalties for interference with digital investigations. The bill has gained bipartisan attention and the support of major labor unions representing healthcare and service workers. Beyond policy, Kada's story has influenced conversations about bail reform and prosecutorial accountability. Many question how a suspect previously charged with abduction and assault could be released without supervision. Legal analysts cite the need for improved coordination between courts and community monitoring programs to prevent repeat offenses from escalating to homicide. The abandoned Ada H. Lewis Middle School, once a place of education, has become a haunting metaphor within public discussion. Its crumbling structure symbolizes societal neglect, the physical decay mirroring institutional breakdown. For years, local residents have reported safety concerns about the building, but budget constraints and bureaucratic delays left it unsecured. In the aftermath of Kada's discovery, the site was fenced off and designated for demolition, yet the imagery of its corridors and overgrown fields persists as a symbol of forgotten responsibility. Documentaries and public panels have since used the location as a case study in urban oversight. Commentators note that spaces left unmonitored and unmaintained often become stages for violence. The schoolyard, in this case, became a silent witness to systemic failure, a space meant for learning transformed into a graveyard for both innocence and accountability. In the final sequence envisioned for documentary presentation, the camera moves slowly across the fence perimeter of the abandoned school. Evening light fades as candles illuminate handwritten posters. Justice for Kada, attached to the chain link barrier. The camera lingers on a single candle struggling against the wind. A recording of Kada's final words plays, "Kidnap me again." The context, tone, and meaning remain subject to speculation, yet the words carry chilling weight. The voiceover concludes, "She was supposed to finish her shift. She never made it home." The screen fades to black. Kada Scott's case functions as a multi-layered study of procedural breakdown. It demonstrates how unreported harassment, institutional inaction, and legal leniency converge to produce tragedy. The community's response, through advocacy, policy reform, and public discourse, has turned the case from personal loss into a movement for accountability. The ongoing legal process will determine individual guilt, but the societal verdict is already clear. When warnings go unheard and environments remain unsafe, justice becomes reactionary rather than preventive. The story's legacy lies not only in exposing one man's actions, but also in documenting a collective failure to act before it was too late. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.